Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's 4th of July edition of
Hey Yo
Radio, where we pick apart the NXT and main roster runs of former NXT talents. My name is Marc Scott. I'm joined by Scott Tyson. What's going on, Scott? How you doing this week?
With a burger in one hand and a sparkling drink in the other, I'm doing fantastic, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing great in our all red, white, and blue here. You know, we're going WWE style here. You know?
That's right.
So, but we're not. As we stated last week, we're going to be looking at Emma this week. So, we're actually not even looking at an American. So,
and that's because we know. Yeah, well, we know what the audience wants better than they do. You understand?
Yeah.
In true WWE fashion.
Mm-hmm. So, like I said, as advertised last week, this week we're taking on a talent who had 2 stays in NXT and also 2 stays on the WWE main roster. So, without any further ado, we present to you Emma. Now, Emma's first music, #Emmalution, actually wasn't done by CFOs. Rather, it's a piece of production music created by Brian Randazzo and was a part of the Video Helper production library. Now, the interesting piece of information here is that I'm guessing back in those days for NXT, they were using these production libraries for music, while Jim Johnston only concerned himself with music for those talents in the main roster shows of Raw and SmackDown. So if you go back and watch one of these old episodes of NXT, you'll notice a significant drop-off as it pertains to the quality of the entrance music of the performers. WWE did start working sporadically with CFOs in 2012. They were the ones who came up with the Tonight is the Night music for Monday Night Raw. That was actually their first hit that they landed with WWE. But most of their work was mainly directed towards main roster talents or NXT talents close to making their main roster debuts. So when Emma started her journey in WWE near the end of 2012, either it was the job of some intern or the performer themselves to pick an entrance music out of a catalog of production themes. In fact, I do remember Bray Wyatt telling a story about finding the original music for the Wyatt family in one of these catalogs. So, Tennille Dashwood, born and raised in Boronia, Victoria, a suburb of Melbourne, Australia, on March 1st, 1989. She has an older brother named Jake, who introduced her to professional wrestling when she was about 8 years old. From 2002 to 2004, she got herself involved in the Australian wrestling scene and started her wrestling training, making a few appearances for the Australian independent promotion PWA Australia under the ring name of Valentine. From 2005 to 2007, she was limited to just setting up the ring, as she had suffered pretty severe shoulder injury. But in 2008, she left home to head to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, to train with Lance Storm at the Storm Wrestling Academy before returning home to Australia again. After wrestling for a couple other independent promotions in Australia, she packed her bags for the States, where she would wrestle for Shimmer, along with a couple of Canadian promotions, Extreme Canadian Championship Wrestling and Prairie Wrestling Alliance, winning championships at both stops. Then, while wrestling for Shimmer in March of 2011, Shimmer announced that she had been signed to a contract with WWE, but first she made a stop back home to Australia to wrestle at a Melbourne City wrestling event. In July, before starting with WWE, she opted to have shoulder surgery since that shoulder had been giving her problems basically her whole career up until then. After the surgery, she applied again to WWE and was signed to their developmental program, Florida Championship Wrestling, based out of Tampa, where she would relocate to. Very shortly after joining FCW, the developmental program would be rebranded by WWE as NXT, and she would officially be known from there on out as Emma. She made her NXT television debut on the November 28, 2012 episode of NXT, where she took on and lost to the country cowgirl, Audrey Marie. I thought it was really interesting here. JR was doing commentary for NXT back in those days, and he noted on commentary that neither competitor had a last name.
He's always been good for pointing that stuff out. So I'm guessing Vince wasn't watching anyway, so he could probably get away with that.
I'm sure Vince was not watching back then. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Vince didn't start watching until they finally landed on USA.
Probably wasn't on his radar.
So she debuted a gimmick of a clumsy dancer on the January 9th, 2013 episode in a losing effort to Paige with the Page Turner. So now she's 0-2, which is really interesting. We're going to get into this. Nowadays you see somebody debut and it's win in like just enhancement matches, against talent that you've never heard of. This wasn't the case for Emma. Emma showed up, she was a nobody, and she lost. And she lost. And she lost. And she lost. And slowly but surely, she started catching on. And we'll get into that. It's a much different treatment than most new talents are given these days.
It's a different mindset. It's a long-term plan and goal. One thing we'll talk about, and we've talked about on previous shows, but we'll continue to talk about, is most of the most recent performers don't stay on NXT for long periods of time, with the exception of maybe Gargano and Ciampa, who've been there a good while. Most people we profiled have been there, a year, maybe 2 years tops.
Year and a half, too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this was still a time where, you could start at the bottom and work your way up. And I think one of the things that's going to come to the show is it really was a different time in NXT when she started. And I think, we may look at her a little differently because she may be that last generation of NXT star to come through at that time that still made the main roster.
Yeah. On the February 27th episode of NXT television, she's taken on Oksana and is really being portrayed as a clumsy idiot. Having problems getting into the ring, slipping off the apron, breaking into her idiotic dance at random points in the match, until about halfway through the match when she takes control of Oksana, only to eventually lose the match as well. It's almost as though she was told to play it up as if she was like drunk. It's very weird. Just the whole portrayal of Emma in these days. Yeah, I mean, about the dance. Everybody knows about the popping of bubbles and stuff, but that hasn't even the popping of the bubbles hasn't come yet. Right. She's just out there doing the stupid dance that she thinks is going to be getting over, and she's even playing it up to she's playing a heel to the crowd. She tries to get into the ring in her reverse skinning the cat maneuver, I guess I would call it, where she stands at the front of the ring and reaches up, grabs the middle rope, and kind of backflips herself up over the rope, and she's having problems doing that week in and week out. One of these weeks she actually doesn't get it on the first try. Do
you think that was one of those WWE tests just to see how she'd react?
I don't know. I don't know. It's really odd, and I don't know if her screwing up was planned or not. That's the other thing. They have her playing up this idiot who is doing this dance that just looks so stupid, and I don't know. Maybe they wanted her to screw up entering the ring. I can't say that it's outside the realm of possibilities here.
Well, and I guess I just look at it and go, well, what's the payoff and the point? You're a screw up. If somehow one day a screw up wins, it's a fluke and no one's going to take them seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, like you said, they had just converted over to being NXT. I'm sure there was a lot of trial and error going on behind the scenes as well.
Sure. So she's back on NXT television a couple of weeks later on March 13th when she takes on Summer Rae. In this match, she debuts the Emma Sandwich, which is like her running dive into a downed opponent in the corner. However, after being badly out-wrestled by Summer Rae, which is just amazing in itself, Emma loses once again, this time to a spinning leg lariat. Definitely, if you have the network, go back and watch this match. It's weird seeing Emma. It's weird seeing Emma portrayed like this. But it's even weirder, like, knowing what I know of Summer Rae. Like, I would have never ever thought I would, in a million years, say she out wrestled somebody. But here in this match, she did.
And again, when Summer will make the main roster, and we'll cover a lot of her tonight because her and Emma are intertwined quite a bit on her first run on the main roster and a little bit on the second as well. They didn't really present her. They didn't choose to use her in that way.
Certainly not. No.
So, I mean, missed opportunity? Could be. We'll see as we go forward.
So on the April 10th edition of NXT, she is comparing her path in NXT to Lady Gaga and Madonna. When she's told she's being seen as a bit of a klutz, she responds with, kids these days, and references the electric slide and the Macarena, and states that they can't compete with the Evolution before tripping while leaving the interview area. Like, I don't know what they're doing with her here. Like,
I will say this: when it gets to her main roster, especially towards the end of her run, there's a lot of talk of, can she pull off the character? Well, from the way you've described and what I went back and watched on the network, she was pulling it off. I mean, she was very believable as that person.
She certainly was. Yeah,
So
I mean, to someone who, and I'm going to come clean here. I was not watching NXT back in those days. It just wasn't available to me. So, especially for this for this episode of this podcast, I did a lot of going back and watching. We say each week that, we use Darren's win-loss for record keeping and everything. Darren wasn't watching NXT back in these days either, so there was a lot of actual, like, watching of old episodes of NXT and seeking out matches when I didn't even know whether she was going to have a match or not. So this episode, yeah, you're welcome. I'm sure we both did a lot more research this time around than we have in previous episodes. Because
obviously it goes a little bit further back, and I didn't have access to it either. So I wasn't watching NXT at the time, so I had to go school myself as well. So, you know what? It was enlightening, though, to see where they came from to where they are today.
Absolutely.
I know usually the cutoff point a lot of times in WWE history starts with maybe pre-Brooklyn, maybe a little before that.
Sure.
But no, this was interesting stuff to watch, and just to see, forgive me for using the term, the evolution of the product and what they've been able to do. Look, we're talking about in less than 10 years. To be a viable promotion that has a spot on primetime television every week.
5
2
years,
hours.
A revolutionary force in sports entertainment.
That's exactly correct. Well done. I teased that one for you. Yeah. But it really is interesting to see how not only has the presentation changed, but the booking philosophy has changed. I won't say changed. I would just say they got their sea legs under them and kind of understood what it was they wanted to do and how they could do it.
Yeah. So April 17th, she's taking on Bayley, and somehow she's getting over with the Full Sail crowd, as there's a homemade Emma sign in the crowd with movable arms. This also marks the first time that she completely nails her convoluted skin the cat-esque entry into the ring from the floor, to the delight of the crowd as she gets cheers. She's getting over as a babyface, and as they were playing up her as a heel earlier on, boom, they just flipped the coin on her here, and she's a babyface, and the crowd's chanting for her. She's smiling, she's happy. This is starting to become the Emma that we know, but she's still clumsy, still not quite there yet.
So what you're telling me is the fans tend to like who they like. They actually can make their own decisions. We can decide, heel or face, who we like, and maybe, just maybe, influence maybe someone's push.
Yeah, I mean, here there was actually, it wasn't loud, but it was an audible Emma Kurt chant. So again, in this match, she hits the Emma sandwich and actually finishes Bayley off with the Emma lock, which, if you recall, was an inverted STF, in which both legs were tied up in an inverted Indian deathlock. Effective submission that looked really good, and it's interesting that her match, that her first win comes against Bayley, knowing where she ends up, and I'm sure we'll cover Bayley down the road. I'm looking forward to that episode.
The 4-hour episode, the Bayley episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Lord have mercy.
Yeah, we may have to break that into 2 parts.
Well, yeah, you're right. We actually may have to.
But yeah, I mean, her first win comes against Bayley. Bayley was, I think she had just made her debut, either in this match or very shortly before. So they're both pretty fresh talents to NXT. It's kind of neat to see. You know, Bayley also didn't even have the ponytail off to the side yet. She was just another girl. You know, she wasn't quite the Bayley that we knew towards the end of her NXT run.
No, but you know, it reinforces what we're always talking about. If you want, you can take the opportunity.
Sure.
You know, the opportunity's there in NXT. Even going back that far, you can see how far Bayley came, and Emma even to an extent. Which of course we'll talk about later. But yeah, I mean, we get so sick of the whole brass ring thing. You know, using that phrase, grabbing the brass ring, it's a joke. But in reality, NXT has been a place of opportunity for pretty much anybody. Give you a shot, see what you got. And I really appreciate that about that particular brand.
Yeah. So on May 29th, on NXT's television, Emma is taking on Audrey Marie again, which was set up on the previous week when she was inadvertently took Audrey Marie's interview time. This time her entrance is accompanied by bubbles as she does her Evolution dance, and the crowd is very into Emma. Her tarantula submission is officially called the Dilemma, and the Emma lock is named as well, as she gets herself another victory.
Can I give you just an extra fact?
Sure.
About Audrey Marie?
Sure.
She would actually go on to marry Tyler Breeze.
Huh. Wonder where you got that one from.
In 2016, she would marry Tyler Breeze.
Yeah, I think
my birthday month, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I think we covered her.
Send your presents now, people.
She was Sasha Banks's first feud, I believe.
I believe so, yeah.
When the NXT Women's Championship is announced along with a tournament to crown the inaugural champion, Emma is entered into the tournament, and on the June 26th episode of NXT Television, she takes on and defeats Oksana in the first round. And on the July 10th, she defeated Summer Rae in the semifinal round to earn her way to the finals, where she would take on Paige and lose on the July 24th episode of NXT. And that's so amazing to me. You know, here, you know, it wasn't that long. You know, she made her debut in January. You know, February and March she's stumbling through, and then she's starting to get some momentum here in April, and then in May she's kind of still building the momentum, and then here it is in June and July. She's in this brand new women's title tournament, and she's gone to the finals and lost to the first NXT. I mean, of course, she's making it to the finals. You're losing to the first NXT women's champion, but that's a very quick transition from this clumsy fool to, hey, I'm fighting for the championship. You know,
and you know, it may very be one of those things where her reaction is starting to get over may have changed a little bit of her trajectory. I mean, we'll never know that, but it's very possible. But again, if you look at the roster that was in that tournament, I'm not going to say they were a murderer's row. No disrespect to the women involved, but she was definitely top 2 at that time in terms of ability, I would think.
Yeah. So she's defeating Summer Rae in a dance competition on the August 7th episode of NXT to become the number 1 contender for Paige's NXT Women's title, as silly as that sounds. But following the dance-off, Ray attacks Emma to start a months-long feud that also includes Paige and Sasha Banks. And on the December 18th episode, I know we're skipping here, but there's a lot of gaps here where she's just not on the show, and that's just really weird too. It's she's starting to gain momentum, and then she just kind of disappears from TV. So but she also does enter into this feud with Summer Rae, which I don't want to go over every single thing, but there's a lot of backstage segments here and not actual matches.
Mm-hmm.
So on December 18th, she's challenged by Natalya for Emma's championship opportunity at Paige's title. And on January 1st episode of NXT, Emma defeats Natalya to keep her title shot.
Which I would assume would be her highest profile victory to date.
It's got to be. I mean, it definitely has to be. There's no doubt about it.
And look, I hate to use this term, but Natalya is not jobbing to someone if they don't have plans for that person, or at least some confidence in them.
Especially in NXT, she's not jobbing to somebody. The main roster, she's a different story, but they respect her a bit more in NXT, and her heritage and her family lineage and all that,
Which they would play up in her match with Paige.
And also Charlotte.
Exactly. So, I mean, NXT's always been different the way they did that. They treat and they protect people. So, again, from that perspective, it would appear that Emma's trajectory is heading upward. I mean, that's a big win, even in a worked sport. I mean, that's a huge honor.
In February, she's racking up singles victories over Alicia Fox and Summer Rae, while also earning a victory as part of a 6-person tag team, defeating the team of Sasha Banks, Alicia Fox, and Summer Rae. Emma finally got her championship opportunity at February 27th's NXT Arrival event, which was the first live event streamed on the WWE Network. However, Paige defeats Emma here, again to retain her title. Shortly after Arrival, Paige would make her WWE main roster debut on Raw, April 7th, the night after WrestleMania 30, where Paige defeated AJ Lee for the Divas title. And following Paige's move to the main roster, the NXT Women's title would then again be declared vacant, and a second tournament would be created. And once again, to determine the champion, Emma is entered as a competitor. However, after making her first appearance on Raw in a mixed tag match, teaming with Santino Marella and defeating the team of Fandango and Summer Rae, she returns to NXT to lose to Charlotte Flair, the eventual champion, in the first round of that tournament to crown the NXT Women's Champion. And in her final stop before heading to the main roster full-time, she teams with Paige and Bayley to defeat the BFFs. And for those of you who don't remember what that stands for, it's the team of Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, and Summer Rae, who are collectively known as the Beautiful Fierce Females. So Emma closes out her first day in NXT with a record of 11-7-0. It's a really good run where we see her debut as a silly character with a lot of quirks, who isn't taken very seriously as a competitor due to her goofy dance and her clumsiness. But slowly but surely gains footing, and at the end of her run in NXT is competing for the NXT Women's title and is widely regarded as a top-level talent in that brand for that division.
And it's interesting that you bring that up as we get ready to transition to her first run in the main roster. We didn't talk about the bubbles too much. Did you want to touch on that?
And that's really weird because the bubbles really just appear out of nowhere. That they don't explain why. It just gets added to her entrance. She comes out doing her Evolution dance, and from the two sides of the ramp, there are bubbles shot out, and she starts using her dance to pop the bubbles. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it was never explained, and it was never. It just came to be. So it just became part of her entrance, and that was that. It was,
and I think
it's really weird the way, considering the way that we know NXT to be today. Usually, something like that would have had some sort of explanation to it.
And I think, unfortunately, even though NXT fans were accepting of it and kind of put two and two together, kind of figured what they were going for, when she would eventually make her main roster debut, there was no explanation of that. And I think to a degree that hurt her on the main roster because it just looked goofy. If you didn't watch NXT, you didn't know, and by no means was their NXT viewership what it is today. So I think that really hurt her. But again, we'll get into that here.
Sure.
Going forward. So Emma would make her first appearance on the main roster, actually not wrestling, but in the crowd. She was supporting Santino Marella, which is weird because apparently she had a very generous rewards program on her credit card because she would appear in a bunch of different crowds in different cities and towns on both Raw and SmackDown after her debut. With tensions really becoming strained between her old foe, Summer Rae of NXT fame, that was never really dealt with on Raw or SmackDown. In hindsight, though, maybe Summer Rae should have called security because this lady was absolutely stalking her in every city and every town. But why let logic get in the way? On the February 3rd episode of Monday Night Raw, Emma would be invited into the ring by Santino Marella to participate in a dance-off against Summer Rae, which Emma would win by a very unscientific fan vote. By the way, for the record, exit polls that night showed as fans left the building, they indicated there was hate in their heart. One fan would say, and I think that really adversely affected Summer's chances of winning. But this would make Emma 2-0 in dance-offs in her WWE career, both in NXT and on the main roster. And following this somewhat tainted dance victory, and in the following weeks,
Tainted.
It's unscientific, okay? I'm just going to say. I've never been a fan of that. But the feud between Emma and Summer Rae would continue, and Emma would eventually begin teasing a potential on-screen relationship, you might say, with Santino, showing romantic feelings one to another on both Raw and SmackDown. And with the level of complexity involved in feuding with Summer Rae and a burgeoning relationship with Santino, she would finally address one of the elephants in the room, and challenge Summer Rae to a match on the February 24th episode of Monday Night Raw, where Emma would gain a measure of vindication by actually defeating Summer Rae. Again, a rematch of something we saw in NXT that was never really developed like it probably could have been. And 1 week later, on the March 3rd episode of Monday Night Raw, Emma and Santino, the Umaga Conqueror, would team up and defeat Summer Rae and Fandango in a mixed tag team match, with once again Emma forced Summer Rae to submit. Now, this was a big deal because if you're a video game fan, an achievement was unlocked, as Emma was able to climb very quickly the WWE ladder and would achieve main event status for the first time on Raw. SmackDown. Okay, well, it was WWE main event. But still, on the March 25th episode of the aforementioned main event, Emma teamed up with Natalya and Digging Deep Here, the Funkadactyls, consisting of Cameron and Naomi, and future special feature on one of our episodes, Eva Marie. But in a losing effort to the team of Summer Rae, Alicia Fox, Oksana, Layla, and Tamina Snuka, and unfortunately, Naomi was pinned by Tamina. The good news is...
God, that sounds like such a disaster.
Go back and watch it. It was. But there's good news, my friends. Yet another main roster achievement was unlocked as Emma received yet another promotion, because she was able to appear on the March 27th episode of WWE Superstars, and would once again face old rival Summer Rae and defeat her via submission. These victories and the momentum that Emma was gathering and garnering earned her a place at the Showcase of the Immortals, And on April 6th at WrestleMania 30, Emma was an entrant in the Vicky Guerrero Divas Championship Invitational match for what you would expect, the WWE Divas Championship. Unfortunately, Emma was not able to break through into the most upper echelon of the WWE Universe as she succumbed to the defending champion, AJ Lee. Disappointed, looking to take out her frustrations on the following night on Raw, Emma and Santino would once again outwit Summer Rae and Fandango in another mixed tag team match with, stop me if you've heard this result before, Emma made Summer Rae submit. On the following episode of SmackDown, Emma would enter into a feud with Layla, when Layla would end up actually replacing Summer Rae as Fandango's dance partner and valet. This was a good break for Emma, though, however, because her association with Santino led to Emma learning the secrets and the proper use of using Santino's finisher, the Cobra Strike. To complete her newfound moveset, Emma would later dub it the Then Emma. She would use it to full effect on the April 21st episode of Monday Night Raw in a victory over Layla. In the beginning of July, Emma's power couple alliance with Santino Marella came to an unfortunate and abrupt end when Santino announced his legitimate retirement from in-ring competition due to wear, tear, and Jim Cornette. And on June 30th...
And Jim Cornette.
Well, there may have been some issues, some slapping that may have taken place in OVW, and that's a wear and tear thing on you. It breaks the body down. And on June 30th, WWE superstar Emma, whose real name is Tenille Dashwood, was arrested and charged with sixth degree larceny, stemming from an incident in Hartford, Connecticut at a Walmart, whereby an iPad mini case, by the way, on sale for $21.14, was not paid for. Walmart security, according to police records, spotted Dashwood swiping, and this is how it was referred to, an iHome Slim Swivel iPad mini case. Again, I want to reemphasize.
It's very great. It's so great that they give us all that detail on the specific item. You know,
it's why people listen. Inquiring minds want to know. And again, I want to reiterate, on sale for $21.14.
Apparently, it was just too expensive for her.
Clearly, police would release her after she would agree to appear the next day at the Hartford Community Court. She kept her word and did so, and she showed up on July 1st. Her lawyer would outline her position, which was she forgot to pay for the case when using the self-checkout machine there at the Walmart. Some enterprising wrestling journalists would reach out to some loss prevention managers at Walmart who took a look at the case, confirmed she did pay for everything else, just not that one particular scanned item or unscanned item. And for reasons I can't explain, the employees would go on the record to criticize her arrest, stating the clerk should have just reminded her the one item needed to be paid for. Not sure why that was needed, but regardless, Dashwood was ordered by the court to perform 1 day of community service and complete an online course, and after that, her charges were dismissed. In the meantime, WWE released her, but would reverse their decision within just a couple of hours once the announcement started making the rounds that she was released. It sparked a pretty good-sized online backlash from, I know Mark's favorite term, the WWE Universe. So yeah, they totally reversed course and brought her back. Throughout the year, Emma would continue securing victories over such competitors as former Funkadactyl Cameron and Alicia Fox. That's the bright side. The unbright side is she was losing almost as many times as she was winning on house shows around the country to both Cameron and Alicia Fox. She would also lose a series of matches against Nikki Bella, our old friend Summer Rae, and Paige. However,
it really says a lot when you're losing to Cameron on house shows. You know, I mean the woman. I'm sure you've seen it. There's an animated GIF out there of her pointing to like she did like some kind of a split move, and she's on top of her opponent, and she's yelling at the referee to count the pin, but her opponent is on her stomach.
Sadly, I'd forgotten that till you brought it back up. Thanks, I appreciate that. You're a good friend.
She also, if you don't remember, she's also the Ariana from the what was it, the WWE Tough Enough, who told Stone Cold Steve Austin that her favorite match in all of WWE history was Melina versus Alicia Fox.
Alicia Fox, that's right.
Greatest match ever.
And God bless Stone Cold Steve Austin, because I remember that very vividly, the look on his face. If ever anybody deserved a what? I think that was that one I could actually let slide, that accursed 4-letter word. I'd have let him just have his say on that one. However, Emma would continue to bounce back and forth, wins and losses, but at Survivor Series 2015, Team Natalya, which consisted of Alicia Fox, Emma, Naomi, and the aforementioned Team Captain Natalya, faced Team Paige, consisting of Team Captain Paige, Cameron, Layla, and Summer Rae in a 4-on-4 Survivor Series elimination tag match. And once again, Summer Rae would feel the wrath of Emma and was eliminated after Emma locked on the Emma Lock. In fact, it was a clean sweep that night for Team Natalya. All 4 members survived. So
they were the sole survivors.
Correct. So she's 1-0 on paper, or 1-1 on pay-per-view now. So there's that at least.
That's definitely a pet peeve of mine. The sole survivors.
Well, one day when we're not doing this, we'll break down why I'm so irritated still to this day about Tito Santana being with Hogan and Warrior and he couldn't survive. Come on. But I digress. Even though she would return to NXT early the next year, she would compete in various matches still on the main roster, including one notable match, which was a battle royal to determine the number 1 contender for the Divas Championship. However, she was unsuccessful in that attempt, as Paige came out on top in that particular matchup. And again, she would bounce back and forth. She would still appear on the main roster in a couple of tag matches. Not overly successful, unfortunately. Lost to the Bella Twins. Her and Paige teamed up. At least in that month. And also she appeared on Superstars, the show that she made. But her and Naomi were defeated by Cameron and Summer Rae. So Mark, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay.
The following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order.
But before we continue on with Emma's second run in NXT, I want to take a moment to appeal to our faithful listeners here. We're currently available now on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Stitcher, SoundCloud, PWInsiderElite.com, and also our YouTube channel. Basically anywhere and everywhere you like to get your podcasts. So please, do us a solid, like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. All of that helps us out and makes us more visible to the masses. So please, if you like our content, share it around, get us more ears. Thank you, and now back to your regularly scheduled programming. So Emma announced she would be making a return to NXT to begin 2015 since her stay on the main roster hadn't been working out. In her highly anticipated return match to NXT television on February 4th, she lost to Carmella. On April 1st episode of NXT, she took on Bayley after criticizing her in a backstage segment, thus officially turning heel. But lost that match as well.
I see a theme here.
We're off to a good start here, you know? It should be noted here, though, that Emma had started dialing down the Evolution dance once she turned heel. She returned to NXT, and her entrance once again was accompanied by bubbles, but she was nowhere near as enthusiastic during her entrance, almost mocking herself. Emma would cost Bayley a match against Dana Brooke on the April 29th NXT television when Emma distracted Bayley when she seemingly had the match in the bag. And following her victory, Dana high-fived Emma on her way back up the ramp while a confused Bayley looked on. And later in the show, we see Bayley looking backstage for Emma, who is nowhere to be found. On May 6th, Emma took on Charlotte Flair and entered wearing a Bayley shirt. And while she gave Charlotte a good fight, all while still wearing the Bayley shirt, in the end, she lost. Following the match, Bayley entered the ring, offered Bayley a hug, which Emma accepted. Or did I say that? Offered Bayley a hug? Offered Emma a hug, which Emma accepted, and then took a Bayley to belly. Following that, Bayley did get her shirt back, though, which she ended up throwing out to the crowd anyway. So she really wanted that shirt badly.
I'm glad she got it back, man. That's critical.
Yeah. On the May 13th, NXT television, Bayley and Charlotte challenged Emma and Dana Brooke to a match on the following week's NXT TakeOver Unstoppable, which Emma and Dana accepted later on in the show. At NXT TakeOver Unstoppable on May 20th, Emma would show up with a good amount of blonde taken out of her hair. And finally, no, she lost here too, to two of the four horsewomen of NXT.
Can't believe that.
But on the May 27th episode of NXT television, Emma and Dana Brooke, in her corner, entered to the new entrance music. Now, this track is called Chemical Mind, and it's composed by Jason Davis, and it's part of the production music library called Getronica, owned by Universal Production Music. That's right, NBC Universal. Obviously, the beginning of her hashtag Evolution has been added to the beginning of it, but this would be her heel music for a little while here in NXT. I honestly, when I was watching all these old episodes, I didn't remember this music. As far as I was concerned, I knew of the hashtag Evolution music and then the Real Deal music, which she'll get later on. This music, I had completely forgotten about. It was much like the Samoa Joe babyface music at NXT.
How do you think it fit her character for the time?
It's fine. I don't think it was great. I think that the music that she gets later on really fits her very well, and we'll get into that. But yeah, it was kind of, we need to change her music. She's changing her character. We need to change with it, and we'll just give her this. And that's what she had. So back to May 27th and her match with Bayley. She would finally collect her first victory, again against Bayley, since returning to the Black and Gold brand in the form of a submission to the Emma Lock. And following the match, Dana entered the ring and held Bayley up while Emma slapped her in the face, which brought out Charlotte to even the odds. However, the team of Dana and Emma got the upper hand on Charlotte as well, and both members of the Four Horsewomen of NXT were left laying. On June 10th, she defeated Blue Pants in a throwaway match. There's really nothing to talk about here. Aside from the fact that she's taking on a really over babyface. I don't know if you remember Blue Pants
I do.
From this time, but she was incredibly over. And for what reason, I have no idea. I never really understood the NXT's crowd's love for Blue Pants, but it is what it is, So she got an important win over someone who was very big time over with that crowd.
Look, she was a big deal when the Vaudevillains took on, was it Blake and Wesley for the tag belts?
Yeah.
When Alexa was managing them. Crowd lost their mind.
Yeah.
So, hey.
Even though we knew that she was coming, we knew that she was going to be their manager for that match. But it hadn't actually been announced, but we all pretty much knew what was going to happen.
And to that point, this is something that's going to be a narrative that's woven through a lot of what we talk about going forward. We've already talked about it previously. There are certain, how do I say this gently, former wrestling industry people who like to swerve all the time, use that term.
You don't say.
My personal opinion is I don't need a surprise all the time. Sometimes it just needs to go the way it's supposed to go. It makes logical sense to me. And then every once in a while you throw a curveball and you go, oh, I didn't see that coming. Do you think there's a problem the way NXT, because NXT for the most part sticks very logical. They don't have a ton of curveball type moments. They do, but not a lot of them.
And I'm fine with that, really. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why I gravitate to NXT as much as I do. Sometimes things happen that just should happen, and I have no problem with that. Even if I see it coming a mile away, it's good storytelling. Just because something should happen, it doesn't always happen, but usually it should, and it does. And it's logical. I like logic in my wrestling, and that's one of the major reasons why I don't watch Raw and SmackDown much anymore. If ever at all. So. No,
I think you bring up a really good point there. Logic and doing what's supposed to happen is not always a bad thing. Take it out of wrestling. How many TV shows or movies have we watched and they went exactly the way we thought they would? And every once in a while, a movie will flip something like, oh crap, I didn't see that coming. It's nice every once in a while, but I don't want that all the time.
No.
It's like Jim Cornette would talk about being the surprise there at the ECW arena. Well, we have to have a surprise all the time. It's not a surprise if you have them all the time.
Yeah.
So I think NXT does a good job not succumbing to that mentality. Like, no, we're going to stay logical. Sometimes the simple answer is the right answer.
So back to Emma. On June 24th, episode of NXT television, she's accompanying Dana Brooke to the ring to take on Cassie, who would later go on to be known as Peyton Royce of the Iconics. For no reason whatsoever, on July 1st, she's got new entrance music that would stick with her for some time. This track is called Real Deal and is available everywhere. It's composed by CFOs, and if you ask me, it's the music I most associate with her heel run here in NXT, and even later on in her return to the main roster. As in her previous music, it starts with the same beat from the beginning of her original #Evolution music, but then is slightly sped up and mixed with the rest of the song. And that beat is also mixed in various other spots throughout the song. Of all of her entrance musics used throughout her run here, this one is by far my favorite.
There's a discussion. Does the theme song make the wrestler? Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes the wrestler makes the theme song. I think this one fit her the most for her heel run. It's a good theme. Again, I'm a big fan of what CFO did. For WWE, especially NXT. It's a good riff. It's good. It's sped up, and I thought she was hitting her stride quite a bit during this time in NXT.
She was, yeah, and I'll hit on that later on. On July 1st, she defeated Carmella on NXT television, and then followed that up a week later with a loss in a tag team match, teaming with Dana Brooke against Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair. 2 weeks after that, on the July 22nd episode of NXT television, she's losing in singles competition to Bayley, essentially ending their feud here. But on the flip side, just over a month later, she's defeating Dana Brooke, Charlotte Flair, and Becky Lynch in a fatal four-way match. Then the duo of Emma and Dana Brooke would disappear off NXT television until about mid-September, when they would confront the newly signed Asuka during her contract signing with William Regal, which would lead to a match between Asuka and Dana Brooke at NXT TakeOver Respect in October. But before we get to that show, Emma and Dana Brooke are defeating the Iconics duo of Billie Kay and Peyton Royce on the September 30th edition of NXT television. Emma would accompany Dana Brooke to the ring at NXT TakeOver Respect on October 7th, where Dana would lose to newcomer and future NXT Women's Champion Asuka. And 3 weeks later, on October 28th, on NXT television, Emma is picking up a victory over Shazza in a throwaway match. And the same can be said 3 weeks later in a victory over Mary Kate. So
was Ashley at ringside?
I'm sorry?
Was Ashley at ringside with Mary Kate?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I tried looking up these two talents, and there really isn't much to say about either of them. You know, they didn't have any prolonged runs in NXT. It's just they were enhancement talents, you know.
Right.
On this December 2nd episode of NXT television, she defeated Liv Morgan, who hadn't yet made it to the main roster and wasn't yet a part of the Riot Squad. Finishing out 2015 for Emma, she took on and lost to Asuka at NXT TakeOver London on December 16th. And in January of 2016, Emma is involved in an 11-woman number one contenders battle royal for a shot at the NXT Women's Championship at the time being held by Bayley, but would lose that to Carmella on the 13th of January. However, a week later, she's involved in a tag team match with Alexa Bliss taking on and losing to the team of Baymella, Bayley, and Carmella on the January 20th episode of NXT television. On February 3rd, she's losing to Carmella, who's being pushed to take on NXT Women's Champion Bayley the following week on NXT. However, she follows up that loss with victories on March 2nd and 16th over Santana Garrett and Deonna Purrazzo, respectively, before finally losing to Asuka on the 23rd of March in her final match under the NXT banner before being sent back to the main roster. During her second run in NXT, Emma was 12-14-0, and overall between her two runs, her record stands as 23-21-0, just above 500, thanks to Darren's win-loss official stats provider of Hey Yo Radio. Once again, it's really a mixed bag with her, and she's racking up victories and following them up with losses. It's like WWE can't fully get behind her, but they don't want to send her on her way, as they clearly see value in her. I don't know. This certainly wasn't the way I had remembered her runs going. Mm-hmm. Then again, I was a fan of her heel character, so her just being on TV each week was probably good enough for me, but they certainly didn't do her any favors here.
Well, based on what you described, it sounds like she was just a victim of timing and circumstance. I mean, you have basically the four horsewomen who are coming to prominence during that time.
She's beating them too, and that's that they're coming to prominence, but she is beating them. You know, mm-hmm. She's getting the upper hand on them a couple of times. You know, but they never really pull the trigger with her and go full speed with her at all.
No, and you pointed out something to me that I also didn't remember her run being that 500 like.
Yeah.
I guess part of me says, well, hey, she was 500 against a murderer's row of, women's talent. By the same token, I still think this was her best run that I saw.
And you can say that it's a murderer's row of talent, but to be honest, looking at her performances during that time, I think she fits with them. Yeah, I think she's a great performer.
No argument there. I'm not trying to take anything away from her talents.
I mean, maybe she's not Bayley, Sasha Banks, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair, but 1A? Yeah.
Well, okay, so she's not one of those four, but then you throw in Asuka's now debuted as well.
Yeah.
And they strapped the rocket to her too. So I mean that makes her what, sixth, maybe?
Yeah.
So maybe that plays into it a little bit as well. You know, she's been yo-yoed now. I mean, I'm glad she made it back to NXT. I have some really good memories. Saw her in person. Her and Dana Brooke as a tag team. A lot of fun.
Oh, they were
But,
great together.
I just wonder if just the numbers game kind of pushed her too far down the list. I don't know. But you said it. She would return to the main roster. And on the March 22nd episode of, you guessed it, Main Event, Emma made her triumphant return to the main roster. But here's the twist. It was alongside former foe Summer Rae. And they attacked Alicia Fox and Natalya during a match between Paige and Naomi. During the match, they distracted Paige, and not only did they attack Paige and Naomi, they would subsequently align themselves with Lana as well, after there was a reconciliation between Lana and Summer Rae, who had been feuding. Emma would continue
Oh my
her
God, the Lana, Summer Rae, Dolph Ziggler, and Rusev. Oh, that was such horrible stuff.
I'm sorry I had to bring that back to you.
I had completely forgotten about that.
Well, Emma would
that won the Gobbledygooker Award that year, I believe, on WrestleCrap.
You know what? I wouldn't be surprised if it did. But Emma was able to parlay that appearance and continue the momentum, because the following week, in her return match, Emma defeated Paige on the March 28th episode of Monday Night Raw. Although I have to be honest, it was after being helped out by Lana. Post-match, she, and along with her allies, would attack Brie Bella, Natalya, Alicia Fox, and Paige, before a returning and future NXT alum, Eva Marie, cleared the ring in the area.
Wait, what? Eva Marie cleared the ring?
Yes, well, yes.
What?
I'm just telling you what happened, man. I know it's believable. I know. As a result, though, and this is big, because a 10 Diva tag team match was announced for the WrestleMania 32 pay-per-view pre-show.
Because that just says that you're worth so much.
Oh, well, let me add value. It was Team Total Divas, consisting of Brie Bella, Alicia Fox, Natalya, Eva Marie, and Paige, and the newly dubbed Team Bad and Blonde of Naomi, Tamina Snuka, Lana, Emma, and Summer Rae. Has it gotten your competitive juices flowing? Are you ready to watch this?
I can't wait to see that match.
It's huge. And at the event on April 3rd, it's huge. On the April 3rd event, Emma would go 0-2 at WrestleManias, as Team Bad and Blonde were defeated by Team Total Divas after Naomi would submit to Brie Bella. After WrestleMania,
Brie Bella. Wow, that's.
I can't make this stuff up. That's the bad part. After WrestleMania,
Brie Bella is a submission expert there, you know.
Well, look who she married. She learned something. Okay. Emma would embark on a new feud with Becky Lynch and actually defeated her on the May 2nd episode of Monday Night Raw. However, she lost to both Becky Lynch and Natalya in a tag team match on the May 5th episode of SmackDown. And on the May 9th episode of Raw, Emma and her former NXT tag team partner Dana Brooke would rejoin forces and assault Becky Lynch during a backstage segment. And that was the good news. The bad news is that on May 16th, WWE announced Emma had suffered a back injury during a live event, which would require surgery. So, unfortunately, any momentum they were going to build, we won't know, because she would miss several months of time. And on the October 3rd, 2016 episode of Monday Night Raw, a new vignette was shown. It was a teaser, you might say. Mark, it was about a makeover You know, if you're older like us, we've seen makeovers, we've seen extreme makeovers for homes, and you know, we've seen shows where people get made up and dolled up, and that's totally cool. I'm happy for that. But this was a makeover of epic proportions, potentially. It was a makeover from just plain Emma to Emmalina.
Wow.
Exactly. Just let it wash over you. Just let it wash over you. And after more promotional videos and vignettes, it was announced that the Emmalina character would first appear on the December 12th episode of Raw. However, and I watched that episode, I specifically remember because I wanted to see this, she did not appear on that episode. But what did appear on that episode was another video stating, quote, she would, quote, be premiering soon. In spite of WWE's constant
teasing, the teasing,
dude, I was there. I was there for every bit of it. And in spite of WWE's constant promotions and promises, Emmalina had yet to appear, and we're in January 2017 now. It's coming to a close. Dave Meltzer would actually address this in his reporting, and this is actually in early February. And this is how he described the Emmalina situation, and I quote, "It's a running joke, and there's no spot ready for her," end quote. I just leave that right there. Now, Mark is the music guy. I'm going to do a little bit of math here. After a staggering 17 weeks of promotion on TV, finally, Mark and I could take deep, full breaths again because the Emmalina character finally showed up on my TV screen. She appeared on the February 13th, 2017 episode of Monday Night Raw, and the transformation was now fully complete. Well, actually, that's not what happened. Emmalina would be the makeover from Emmalina back to Emma. So we were promised Emmalina would debut, and she sort of did, but became Emma again. So I'm not sure what happened there, but
they created like music for her and everything. I'm not even going to bother playing it here because literally she had it one night.
Mm-hmm.
She came out to it one night, and it was gone.
And that was it.
I mean, this was 7 from WCW all over again.
Right. You can Google that one, kid. Just look 7 Dustin Rhodes. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Reportedly, the Emmalina gimmick, the WWE backstage producers just didn't think she could pull off what they thought the character should be. They didn't see her ability after going through extensive rehearsals. They just didn't think she could pull off the character, which they were hoping was a throwback to some of their other, I guess, divas back in the day, in the Attitude Era. They just didn't think she could do it. So Emma, undeterred, would appear on the April 3rd episode of Monday Night Raw. By the way,
I'm sorry. Before you go into that, they didn't think that she could pull off this character, and that's really the shame thing here. The shame of all this is that here, we were talking about her debut in NXT and how she was a clumsy klutz that, had problems getting into the ring. She's slipping off the apron. She's doing her goofy dance in the middle of the matches, and she's playing that character perfectly well.
Mm-hmm.
And that character gets her over. And here, it's like, well, all right, we want you to do some character acting. Maybe you're not a good character actor. How do you even say that? How do you even say that about her?
Well, I guess the ultimate question is, what does the marquee sign say? Does it say character actors or does it say wrestling? She can do that.
It says superstars, pal.
That's sports entertainment. Yes, I forgot. But that's what's on the marquee. You've got someone who can go in the ring. You want them to give them a character or something they can do, or at least give them the chance to go out in front of a crowd. Look, they've sent plenty of other people out there in front of the crowd, and it died on the vine horribly. let's see, recent memory, Alexa Bliss in that god-awful segment a couple of years ago. There's been different ones that are just I felt so bad for the talent. But at least give her the opportunity. You've invested time, you've invested money, you've invested TV promotional time, and then you just pull the plug.
And that's money right there, too. That's a lot of money right there.
It's huge. Look, they weren't under the deals they are today. And so you waste all that time, debut, and then basically just go, ha, 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 we're going to do something else. Nobody thought that was entertaining. No one thought that was funny. But she would appear on the April 3rd episode of Raw following all this. And what I failed to mention, between February 13th and April 3rd, Mark, they did even more vignettes. This time they were promoting her return as her previous character, her villain character.
Okay.
They did more vignettes for Emma.
Because we didn't know what she was before?
Because I guess we were so starstruck by the potential of transforming into Emmalina that the very thought that didn't happen would completely confuse we sheeple, we the audience. In her return match, she would team with Charlotte Flair and Nia Jax, and they would take on old partner Dana Brooke, Sasha Banks, and Bayley. But unfortunately, they would lose that 6-person tag team match. And the unfortunately digs even further because Mark hinted at, was it 2013, 2014 she had a shoulder injury? Isn't that what you had said earlier?
That's way early on. That's that's at the very beginning of her career here.
And unfortunately, she would suffer another shoulder injury at a live event in Liverpool on May the 7th. She would eventually make her return in late June on Raw in yet another 6-woman tag team match where she and Nia Jax and now Alexa Bliss were beaten by Sasha Banks, Dana Brooke, and Mickie James. On an August 20th edition of Raw, Emma would introduce yet another theme song.
It's all about me.
Emma's fourth, technically fifth if you want to count Emmalina's music, and final entrance music in WWE was called All About Me. And it's produced by CFOs, and it's her first music that didn't include the beginning of her hashtag Evolution music. My guess is that they were trying to finally rid her of the character's history as the goofy klutz that would dance her and pop bubbles on the way to the ring. This was certainly a different sound for her entrance, and to be honest, for me anyway, when that music hit, I wasn't quite sure who it was that was coming out anymore. I think because they took away that initial beat, it took away part of her identity, and it's like removing the glass shattering from Steve Austin's entrance or removing the gong from the beginning of The Undertaker's music. It just... And that kind of happens with a lot of the current music for these guys and gals. They don't have the same identity anymore without that one like small initial sound. It's not there, and you can't tie a music to someone's entrance so vividly anymore.
No, and this generation of fans have been tied to you're supposed to react the minute the music hits. When not everybody used to have music back in the day. So that's why, to me, man, the theme is so important. Not just identify the character, but it fills in the character. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Longtime wrestling fans will remember the Ultimate Warrior's theme song and can still bang their head to it because it was just him. It fit him perfectly. Mm-hmm. And there's something to be said for the music. You mentioned Stone Cold. Without that, he's not Stone Cold. Without the opening riff of If You Smell What the Rock is Cooking, it's a little bit different presentation. So, excellent point on that. Thank you. Well, the following week, apparently her theme song was a hit because on the September 4th episode of Raw, she teamed with Nia Jax. They beat both Alexa Bliss and Sasha Banks to earn themselves spots in the Raw Women's Championship match at No Mercy. Here's a little bit extra bit of trivia. That would be her first pay-per-view match since the 2014 Survivor Series. Because remember, her last pay-per-view appearance was not the WrestleMania that year because that was the pre-show. So So you can't even really count that. Although I'm told we're supposed to, I don't really count it because I can. Darn it! At the event, unfortunately,
that's why Austin Aries isn't there anymore, right?
Well. That he's just not a happy person. That's all. He just doesn't seem very happy very often. At the event, she was not able to win the Raw Women's Championship, as unfortunately she was pinned by the returning Bayley. On the October 9th episode of Raw, she confronted then General Manager Kurt Angle about who was going to face the debuting Asuka at TLC, Tables, Ladders, and Chairs. Emma would get probably her biggest win on the main roster when she would defeat Sasha Banks, Alicia Fox, Bayley, and Dana Brooke to earn the right to face Asuka. Unfortunately, she lost via submission. Yeah. Frustrated over her loss, Emma would challenge Asuka again to a rematch. And on the October 23rd episode of Raw, Emma was again defeated by Asuka, which would turn out to be... Go ahead.
Now, these were Asuka's first matches on the main roster, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I specifically remember these matches. We've talked about certain people coming up to the main roster and that they're not given any favors in who they're facing. Like, who was it? Shinsuke Nakamura made his main roster debut against Dolph Ziggler and took forever to defeat him, correct?
Yes, correct.
Now, here we have Asuka making her debut against Emma, and these matches went really long as well, if memory serves me. I thought that they were fantastic matches. I thought that Emma gave her everything that she needed in these matches to just really put her over as a big time star. But apparently, I guess that wasn't the thought backstage in WWE, as far as I understand.
If you were just going to put her to just blitzkrieg somebody and then I would have sent Alicia Fox out there.
Mm.
They didn't do that. They sent her, and they were really good matches. To me, I look at it both sides. Yes, Asuka is very impressive, but we knew who she was from NXT. Emma got a chance to really shine in a couple of long bouts that people would see and hopefully be like, hey, she's really good.
That didn't happen, though.
It didn't. In fact, that would turn out to be her final match in WWE because on October 29th, 2017, Emma's bubble would finally burst as WWE would announce they had released Emma from her contract. And to date, she has not returned. One additional note I do want to throw in is our good friend of the show, Baron Corbin, was on the main roster at the same time. What is the relevance, you may ask? Because I try to have at least one Baron Corbin reference per show. You're welcome.
No.
You thought you were going to get away with it, but no. I couldn't find any way to tie them together, so I just went with it.
Oh.
You're welcome.
I mean, this is... I know going into this, we spoke a little bit before we started to record. Going into this, I kind of thought that, picking someone like Emma, this is an interesting way to kind of freshen up the show. Not that we really needed to freshen it up. It's a new format that we're doing anyway. But, this is someone who has started in NXT, went up to the main roster, didn't really click on the main roster, got sent back to NXT, and then did well in NXT. Well, so I thought she did well. Gets sent back to the main roster, and then ends up being released. It was just, it was going to be a different change, like a change of pace here. And I'm glad that we did cover her, but it got kind of depressing. It's as much as I'm used to seeing someone do well in NXT, go to the main roster, and not do well. She didn't do particularly well in NXT either. So it's like I said earlier. I was a fan of hers. I liked I liked her heel character a lot in NXT. So I guess I was just happy seeing her on a weekly basis on TV. But yeah, I mean, going back with the fine-tooth comb and picking apart like various feuds and her wins and losses and stuff, it's sad. It really is.
This was really hard for me because, we try to throw a grade at the end of the show on the individuals that we cover. And a couple of other little notes I jotted down. She is one of the first NXT women to be called up and not win some form of either the Divas Championship or the Women's Championship up to the brand split, and even on that. She never accomplished that.
She never accomplished that at any point in NXT. She's never held any gold in WWE, which is just mind-boggling.
The NXT side, I'm not as upset about.
No,
because the title doesn't change like we change clothes. But on the main rosters, she didn't get just a run. I mean, look at people who did get runs. God bless Alicia Fox. She had a run with the title.
Carmella
she beat Charlotte Flair for the title. So to me that stands out. Like, wow, she's one of the few who've been called up who has not, on the women's side, won a variation of the championship. I was also surprised to see that she rarely competed on pay-per-view. Even though she was obviously a really good hand and an excellent worker, she didn't get a lot of exposure at that level. And probably the third thing that jumps out at me is the amount of time WWE spent, which if you add in the other vignettes they ran to remind people she's coming back as her villainous persona again.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, you're talking a good 23, 24 weeks of program time.
That's an incredible amount of time there.
Dude, it's half a year. It's almost half a flippin' year of promos, and nothing came of it. Nothing. It blows me away. And she comes back from NXT, and I'm still going to stick to my gun on this one. What we talked about is I think she was doing her best work at that time. And she came back to the main roster, and the main roster had really started to change from the divas to really the women's revolution. And I think she just kind of landed somewhere in the middle of those two elements. I don't think she ever made it into that echelon of the women's revolution, because she absolutely deserved to be there. They signed her for her reason. They didn't. She's a beautiful woman. Make no mistake. And my wife's in the next room. She can't hear me say that. But she is. But they didn't sign her for that. I'm sure that didn't hurt. But they signed her, I would assume, for her ability and what they saw she could be. And she never got that opportunity. And I'm just looking at it logically, man, that's wasted money that you didn't get returned for. And I feel like she could have given you a whole lot more. So I'm going to start out the grading period on this one, and this is hard. This is the hardest one I've had to do. Because
here's the interesting part about this. How much of the grading is on WWE's usage of her versus her ability to adjust to do what's asked of her?
I don't know, because she was routinely on Main Event, routinely on Superstars. She did get exposure on Raw and SmackDown. It's not like they didn't ever feature her, but she was never just pushed up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard when you're grading this stuff. You know, how much of it is talent, effort, how much of that is behind the scenes stuff. Geez, I'm gonna hate myself in the morning. I guess I'm gonna say something in the range of a C plus. I don't want to be overly unfair to the talent because, like you said, there's behind the scenes stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if people aren't pulling for you, if people aren't pulling for you and supporting you, you're only going to go so far anyway, no matter how talented you are.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think talent-wise, I think she's up there. I think she's a very good talent. Like I said, you know, we said that she came in around the same time that, like, you know, she's wrestling against the 4 horsewomen of NXT, even on the main roster. So that bumps her down a notch. But it's not her fault. It's just that those 4 are just incredible talents, you know. And they're 4 incredible talents that you can build a women's division around, and they did that. Unfortunately for Emma, she's not one of those 4. So when it came to have matches week in and week out over the women's titles, she just wasn't in the conversation. Should she have been in the conversation? I'd like to think that she should have been, and I think that she could have hung with them. But also, you know, that there's always the saying that, you know, when you walk into WWE, Vince McMahon sees you in one way, and you know, for a guy like Daniel Bryan, you know, that's he came in, and no matter how over he got, he just kept getting pushed down because, you know, he didn't have the look that Vince likes. You know, talent in the ring, he is second to none. You know, I think Emma's kind of the same way. You know, Emma came up to the main roster. I think they kind of had lukewarm hopes for her. They put her with Santino. That they saw her, Vince saw her as a comedy character, and that was it. I don't think that he ever had any other thought for her other than, this is Emma. She's a goofball. She does this stupid dance, and that's that. And even when she came back later on with a new attitude, a new look from NXT, it was too late. You know, Vince already had his picture of what Emma is in his mind, and he doesn't stray from that stuff.
And unfortunately, her being sent down to NXT, let's use a current situation. Let's say Finn Balor being sent down to NXT. Mm-hmm. He's getting some good work in there and doing some good work, and his promos are good. And he, you know, when the world was able to travel, he was in NXT UK. What do you think his future looks like when he goes back to the main roster? If Vince is still making the call, he's still Finn Balor.
He's still Finn Balor. He's still going back up to the main roster, and he's going to be out there smiling every week.
Right.
Maybe winning the Intercontinental Championship. I don't ever see him winning a top title in WWE because that's not what Vince sees in him. And I don't think that's going to change, sadly.
And we're talking about, 4 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't changed. Almost 4 years ago. And I think Emma is just a victim of that. You know, it's not fair, but you have to know when you go to that company, that's the way it is. It's not fair. But you are who he says you are. You know, you referenced Daniel Bryan, man. That took a special act of Congress, so to speak, to get anybody to pay attention. Yeah. And they didn't want to even then. They didn't want to. Basically, they were going to lose their show every week. And they're not going to do that. So they gave just enough. And what happened, and I know this is getting a little off topic, I'm sorry. What happened right after he wins the world title? He's running from Kane, protecting his wife.
Uh-huh. And then he gets injured.
Right. So we'll never know how it fully turned out. But in a way, that's probably how Vince saw it anyway. Mm-hmm. So he feels vindicated. Fair or unfair.
Exactly.
And so, unfortunately for Emma, it's a bubble up there. We hear everybody talk about it, especially when people are let go, what a bubble it is. And unfortunately, she wasn't high enough in the pecking order. to hang on. I'll be honest with you, I'm amazed Dana Brooke has held on as long as she has. I like Dana Brooke an awful lot.
I do too. Mm-hmm.
I don't think she gets the credit she deserves for the work she can do. Promo, no. Work, yes. But again, it's like Star Trek. It's like being typecast. You'll always be whomever. Because we saw you on that and you got famous. That's the only person you can ever be. It's not fair, but that's the way it works in WWE land.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I would give her NXT run like for the story, the early on story of her like finding her way. I'm gonna give that like a solid B+ to an A-. I thought that was a really great way to establish a character. Like we said, unconventional. It's not what we're used to seeing, where someone comes in and boom, they're a star because they get wins over enhancement talent. But here she comes in, she's facing talent of that time period, and she's losing, and she's losing, and she's losing. And then she gets a victory over Bayley, who was also a brand new character around that same time as well. So, it was believable, yet it was also kind of quick when she was in the finals of that title tournament against Paige. But at that time, there wasn't a large crop of talent down in NXT. So you also kind of have to grade on a curve there too.
No, I agree. I mean, like we said, if you look at the brackets, it wasn't exactly what we would say women's revolution. But for her, see, I'm going to take the wins and losses away because I know it's cool to talk about, but it's worked. I would have to give her in the B+ range too, because, and maybe it's just my mind and what I remember, and a lot of it is effective because you see these talents on smaller shows and you actually get to interact with them and they get to do longer matches and really flesh out their character and try things. I can't tell you how many innovations of Angelo Dawkins I've seen in person, how many different variations of it. But on these local shows in Florida, they get a chance to flesh things out and try stuff because even though they record everything, no one else is going to see it. Mm-hmm. And, she's one of those who I think benefited from it. And I think that's part of, I don't want to say the attraction because that's not the right term, but part of the fondness.
Uh-huh.
Look, you can only work with who you have. Ric Flair is Ric Flair because, he wrestled Dusty Rhodes and Harley Race and all the famous champions, right? All the stars in the 80s. Nobody talks about him coming down to Florida and wrestling Scotty McGee or going to Pensacola and wrestling whoever their local guy was who never made it big because you can only work with what you got. Sure. And I think she gets a little bit of a bum rap because maybe she didn't have the immense talent around her to work with. That doesn't mean she wasn't talented though. I think it's just one of those situations where it was a missed opportunity on WWE. I believe they could have gotten a whole lot more.
Oh, definitely. And just to be clear, I say wins and losses, and this is professional wrestling. It's all predetermined. I understand that they're not going out there and really fighting it out, and that their wins and losses are what they're sent out there to do. But it does alter your perception of someone if they're constantly losing.
Mm-hmm.
That Charlotte Flair goes out there and wins every single week. Do we like it? Not necessarily, but you know what? She's the queen. She's a great performer, mm-hmm. and that's how they portray her. Yeah. Emma went out there a lot of weeks and lost. And is she a great performer? She's a pretty darn good performer. Is she a Charlotte Flair performer? No.
No, but a lot of it's being put in position too.
Sure.
So I would say that if you're not given the opportunity, you can never fully show. who you are and what you are. And unfortunately, she's bounced around a little bit post WWE. Was in Ring of Honor for a while. Did one of the AEW shows, I believe a Battle Royal. Didn't really make a dent. I don't believe got signed there by AEW. So yeah.
Yeah, I met her at WrestleCon. Was it last year when WrestleMania was up here in at MetLife?
Was last year or 2 years ago? No, it would have been last year because it was
2019.
The transportation debacle, yes.
Yeah, it was 2019. So I met her at WrestleCon, and I was looking forward to meeting her. Because like I said, I was a fan of hers. I liked her work in NXT, and even those matches she had with Asuka when Asuka went to the main roster, I thought she looked great in those matches. She had somebody credible to work with that didn't just use her. Actually helped her to look good as well. Personality-wise, maybe I caught her on a bad day, but I would never bother spending any money to meet her again. That's
sure.
Personality-wise, I don't know how. I don't know how she and Zack Ryder ever worked out. She didn't seem to have much personality and was not very talkative.
Well, it's in that closed loop. You're around everybody all the time.
Yeah.
That's why you never book another man's wife with another wrestler. Remember? Yeah. Never do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one was interesting for me. It caused me to have a lot more feelings and thoughts.
Sure.
Than I had on the previous ones. The others weren't yo-yoed, at least from the main roster back to NXT. This was our first real example of that.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's about all we have for tonight. Do you have anything else that you wanted to go over? Or?
No, this is all. I guess we have more Great American Bash stuff next week. We may have something to talk about when we're done. Profiling. Yeah. We might have something we might want to delve into.
Sure.
But nope, that's all I got for tonight.
All right. So we'll be back next week, same time, same place. Well, I say that last week as well. We're actually going to be a little bit early next week due to scheduling conflicts. So keep an eye out sometime early in the week, like maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, when we take a look at our next NXT alum. So for Scott Tyson, I'm Mark Weitz, thanking all of you for your support. Hey Yo Radio is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The songs used throughout this show are properties of their respective copyright holders.